Welcome to San Francisco History Days, Facades, Mid-Market Landmarks, paintings by Patricia Araujo. Thank you so much for joining me today. We have officially arrived to San Francisco History Days' 10th year anniversary. I am so thrilled to be a part of this very special annual event and get to share with you a slideshow presentation of my works inspired and developed by San Francisco's Central City architecture. All text, original artworks, and narration are by yours truly, Patricia Araujo. This presentation will include the following content: an introduction and intent to creating these paintings inspired by the building facades of Mid-Market District. It will also include a bit of history or historical background pertaining to particular buildings that I was attracted to and hence created a series of works. Some of the buildings include, as listed here, the Golden Gate Theater, the Warfield, the Hibernia Bank, and so forth. And this slideshow will conclude with my exhibition highlights and participation with San Francisco History Days. Today we celebrate its 10th year anniversary, and what a great tribute to be able to share these works with all of you. Let's begin. While living in San Francisco's South of Market, also known as SoMa, I witnessed the changes taking place in this redeveloping neighborhood and found myself enchanted by the rich architectural history of that area and the decayed beauty that remains. My fascination with domes, towers, sacred and municipal structures began with daily observations of the Golden Gate Theater at 6th and Market. Since the late 1990s, I've painted these facades of both iconic city landmarks and downtown buildings and continue to incorporate them into my new works. When I first moved to the South of Market, warehouses were a prominent feature of the neighborhood. What I've loved most about SoMa in Mid-Market is the diverse styles of architecture, from Beaux-Arts tradition and Art Deco inspired, to factory and industrial sites, and now in contrast with the new high-rise and commercial buildings that continue to be built and expand for a new city. San Francisco's Mid-Market District is located at the stretch of Market Street and in between 5th and 10th Streets. A bit of a background for this district. Following the 1906 earthquake and fire, the stretch of Market Street between Powell and Polk developed as a lively theater and shopping district that by night was a sequence of lights and glowing neon that seemed to stretch to the horizon on marquees announcing theater and cinema fare, alive with the pulse of the city. By the late 1960s, the district lost much of its glamour, all of Market Street's brightly lit marquees, and most of its neon signs were removed. When traffic was diverted away from the Mid-Market area by BART construction, the district's fate sank into a decline from which it has never recovered. Stores and theaters that have thrived for decades struggled on for a while and then closed forever. Mid-Market became a constantly changing landscape of liquor stores, fast food outlets, pawn shops, check cashing companies, and some mysterious storefronts, few of which have survived more than a few years. Many of the fantastic landmarks on Market Street between 5th and 9th Streets had been abandoned for decades, and some have been restored since the mid-2000s, while others are still in need for conservation. It is hoped one day we will see these storefronts and theaters glowing and with neon lights again. My paintings pay a homage to the central city's building facades of both old and new. Many of the sites featured I've painted before, and some are seen individually, and while others collectively. In my cityscapes, I sense the presence of the silent stage uninterrupted by inhabitants. These paintings highlight the exteriors of complete structures and also depict architectural fragments. Their style is largely abstract. Playfulness of forms juxtaposed against painterly skies. Painted by bright colors, opposing to its usual gray fog, and in the hopes to bring an uplift from the blight that has been present. My works speaks about the possibility of growth and renewal, exploring architectural practice as both imagination and reality. A marvelous city that is in constant flux. One of my favorite buildings to look at is the Golden Gate Theater. It is situated at 1 Taylor Street, intersected at an angle between Market Street and Golden Gate Avenue, which merges between the Tenderloin District through Mid-Market into SoMa. Crossing 6th Street, one of the busiest streets in San Francisco, the Golden Gate Theater stands independently, an elegant icon. Form and function must complement one another. A theater must not only be beautiful, but completely functional. This was said by the architect G. Albert Landsberg. He built the theater in the 1920s. The Golden Gate Theater showed silent films for over 50 years. During the 1960s, it was converted into a 2-screen theater. It suffered little damage, restored as a single auditorium, and reopened in 1979 as a performing arts center. Its grand structure has a marvelous Art Deco sign, and one of the most attractive features of this theater to me is its dome, a silver metallic voluptuous dome, although in recent years it has been repainted in white cream, and it still looks very beautiful. This piece is an earlier drawing I did inspired by this theater. Departure is one of the first paintings I did of the Golden Gate Theater. This piece derives from an observation coming from the Golden Gate Avenue. The theater seems to assent. This painting can relate to a classical approach in its selection of such a structure and its centered composition. It may be pictured as in full light or twilight. Included on the left are square patches of street signage inviting the pedestrian to stare. The theater is about to go, yet it wants to stay. This drawing, titled 6th Street Series 1, Golden Gate Theater, this was a linear drawing that combines personal architectural icons confronting one another, as if the Golden Gate Theater is rising from an office building, propelled towards the tall dome at the right corner, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which originally is located at 7th and Folsom Streets in San Francisco. Also depicted is a tall light fixture and the PG&E thermal plant of 6th and Jesse Streets, which I will be talking about later in this presentation. These two structures are on their own, they stand independent, yet the tower is not seen as tall as it is seen in reality. In this drawing, the tower is protected, standing below the church. I envisioned this drawing as a nostalgic setting, seen as individual forms, imagining how they combine as one. In this drawing, Golden Gate Theater meets Tower. It is a romantic approach, presenting the Golden Gate Theater meets the PG&E thermal plant of 6th and Jesse Streets. This linear drawing is graphite and pastel on aircraft metal. The thermal plant of 6th Street is overlooking the Golden Gate Theater, while the street light on the left goes skyward. Kind of similar to the first painting I made of the Golden Gate Theater titled Departure. These guardian structures stand individual and are harmonious. And here we have the second drawing that I did derived from the first piece titled Golden Gate Theater Meets Tower, followed by this one, Golden Gate Theater Meets Tower 2. This piece was made in graphite and pastel on paper some years after, in 2010. And for this piece, it is in a horizontal format, accentuating the graphite lines and bringing more volume to the forms. This painting I titled Golden Gate Theater 2. It was painted in 2013. It is oil on panel. And this image was in reference to a photo that was taken by a dear friend and local artist that lived in San Francisco. His name was Mark Ellinger, with whom I've collaborated in a past exhibit. And I'll be talking about him later through this presentation. He was so kind to give me permission to borrow his photo so I could have it as a reference for painting. And here it is. It is painted with the dome in the cream white. As I said earlier, it used to be silver, then it went to a cream tone. It has a little more dramatic effects with the sky, painted in emerald green and blues. From the Golden Gate Theater, we're now entering another site, the PG&E thermal plants, located at 460 Jessie Street, and in between Mission and Market, and in between 5th and 6th Streets. They're quite noticeable when you're walking in the neighborhood or coming from afar, such as from the Freeway 280 South, and you're exiting 6th Street. They're magnificent to look at. And I've been fascinated by these smokestacks, and especially the smoke effects that create in the sky, and they just give different color to the landscape, such as it is witnessed in this piece titled View from 6th and Jessie Streets. A little background about the thermal plants. I believe they were built in the 1920s, and since 1999, it has been operated by the Energy Steam Plant, which currently operates around the clock to produce steam to meet the needs of the buildings served by the downtown steam loop. I've incorporated these thermal plants in several of my paintings, and this piece is titled A Mysterious Icon. I've in particular admired this tower that has an Egyptian motif at its highest point in brick color, detailed in tiny diamond shapes. Although some years past, it has been repainted and it now has a horizontal lime green stripe around the top. So it looks a little bit different, but it's still very attractive. No matter what time of the day, I love to observe this tower and feel its guardian presence watching over me. Rising still, uniting the PG&E thermal plants of Jessie Street, I bring them together linked by ropes. The ropes can be read as wires, weights, lifeline. Although the ropes are light in weight, they may or may not support the towers. At the same time, they constitute a glorious setting, an uplifting holding all together. These towers are standing on a green platform and can be part of a nautical setting, in water and in motion, yet still. Also, a flag and an arrow are moving skyward. The larger tower on the far left stands strong and static, infinite against the sky. The other two are slightly diagonal and slanted. The taller tower could be a reincarnation of the other, or its shadow. The copper tower is solid in its interior, alluding to magic and the unknown, sustained by the building on the corner. A bright melon pink background illuminates Rising Still. a prosperous day, as if nothing nor no one will impede us. We keep on rising. Intercontinental meets thermal plant presents the thermal plant of 6 and Jesse Streets against the tall building facade of the Intercontinental Hotel, located in San Francisco south of Market. This time, the buildings are featured in a linear format and abstracted forms, surrounded by a changing cloudy sky. This painting was inspired by a photograph taken by San Francisco Chronicle urban critic John King, whom I've admired his writings and photography. I was delighted he offered permission for me to paint this piece. Rooftop view of 6th Street. This painting was inspired by a photograph taken by San Francisco photographer and a dear friend of mine, Mark Ellinger, with whom I had the great honor to have exhibited together years past. Ellinger gave me permission to paint this image back in 2010, which he originally captured the rooftop view from atop a hotel on 6th Street. The scene showcases the distinct warehouses of the neighborhood and a mutual favorite site, the PG&E thermal plants of 6 and Jesse Streets. The Warfield, also known as the Warfield Theater, is a 2,300-seat music venue in the heart of San Francisco. It is located at 982 Market Street and intersects at Golden Gate Avenue. The Warfield was built by G. Albert Landsberg, the same architect that designed the Golden Gate Theater, located just across the way. This theater opened in 1922. The Warfield was a popular location that featured vaudeville and other major performances. In keeping with its illustrious past, everyone has played there. The entertainment in the 1980s ranged from bands such as The Clash, Grateful Dead, and U2, to theatrical productions such as the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Composed of the Warfield Theater and attached office space, the Warfield Building. It is 8 stories high in a steel frame construction. In this painting, A New Day, 6th and Market, presents the building facades of the Golden Gate Theater, seen in the center and accompanied by the Warfield, all in a continuous silhouette, painted in bold, solid, bright colors and accompanied by a lipstick glossy pink-orange sky. The original Warfield Theater has an elegant facade, including a Baroque-style ornamentation. At above the entrance, it has 2 tall female statues that are called caryatids, and their presence may represent a welcoming gesture for those entering the theater. In this painting titled Warfield, I present the theater's main entrance facade painted in a bright color palette, and this time placing the caryatids closer to the door instead of its original placement. This time, the marquee features the Sisters of Mercy, an 80s goth rock band. The original concert date was in March of 2006. This is another painting interpretation of the Warfield Theater, and it is painted with showing the caryatids above the marquee, as if they're welcoming the guests to their space. And the marquee reads The Sisters of Mercy, a band that played there back in, in March of 2006, and earlier time in April of 1991. At the far right top corner, there is a body of a female shape, and it's very abstract. And below her, there are initials for the name CRA, which stands for the Crazy Horse, a gentleman's club that was for most of its life a cinema and has changed many different names, from the Lesser Nickelodeon to the Crest to the Egyptian in 1976, and then it reincarnated as the Crazy Horse in 1994. San Francisco's forgotten Fox Theater. It was originally situated at 1350 Market Street, a city landmark designed by the noted theater architect Thomas W. Lamb. The Fox was considered the world's finest theater. It was built in the 1920s by a movie pioneer, William Fox, as a showcase for his films of the Fox Film Corporation, along with elaborate stage shows. The Fox Theater opened in 1929 with a premiere of Behind That Curtain, a Charlie Chan movie produced by William Fox. The theater was closed and demolished in 1963 due to financial difficulties. In 1964, BART began construction of its subway system, which for a decade turned downtown Market Street into a massive gaping trench. The Fox was replaced by high-rise apartments and commercial space covering the entire block of Market Street between Polk and Larkin, and it was named Fox Plaza in memory of the theater, and which continues to stand there today. In memory of the Fox Theater, I wish to create a painting from 1929 showing the entire block of the theater, and in this piece is the beginning sketch for this painting. And in this piece, we see the completed painting in all mauve purple tones, very soft pastel approach. And at the same token, it's very abstract, but soft, and it's not so linear as in my other paintings or even from the original sketch, kind of making it a little more ghostly effect in memory of the Fox. From 1874 to 1937, San Francisco's Old Mint was the most active mint in the United States. It is located at 88 Fifth Street at the corner of Mission Street. It was built by Alfred Bolt Moulier in 1874. Moulier's design was classical Greek revival, Doric columns, and Roman scale and proportions. Sandstone from Newcastle Island in British Columbia was shipped in the 3 schooners for the facing of the upper floors and for the 6 colossal columns on the portico. The basement walls were of granite from the Griffith Quarry in Penryn, Placer County, California. On May 26, 1870, the cornerstone of the Mint was laid. The building opened on a rainy Saturday, November 5, 1874. And in 1877, over $50 million in coins were produced. Moulier knew well that the Pacific coast was subject to earthquakes, and with remarkable foresight, he designed the Old Mint to float on its foundations in an earthquake rather than shatter. After the earthquake of 1906, the Old Mint was the only financial institution able to open for business in San Francisco, and it became the depository and treasury for the city's relief fund. By the 1930s, 1/3 of the nation's gold reserves were stored at the Old Mint. In 2010, I painted this piece titled New Mint. At that time, the Mint was run by the San Francisco Museum and Historical Society. They were putting a lot of efforts for renovation and conservation, giving guided tours for folks. And in later years, this was also run by the California Historical Society and with the city. And it has been the house for hosting San Francisco History Days, now on its 10th year. Although due to COVID, we are now celebrating this event virtually, but we hope that we can be there again in the new year. This piece is an interpretation of what it was supposed to be. Back in 2010, there was images projected about this building to become a San Francisco Museum of History of San Francisco. So in this piece, we show an all-glass ceiling, which was supposed to cover the courtyard for the new museum. In 2004, I witnessed a renovation of the old Emporium building, which involved the elevation of its dome 60 feet off the ground. San Francisco's Old Emporium is located at 5th Street between Market and Mission Streets. The classical facade that survived the 1906 earthquake and the glorious rotunda by which shoppers browsed underneath was called the greatest mercantile building in the world when it opened in 1896. The Emporium was designed by the architect Albert Pisces. The Emporium was a cultural crossroads for decades by Bay Area residents who would meet under the dome. The Old Emporium had been closed for decades until the renovation of 2004 to further become the new San Francisco Westfield Shopping Center. I observed several phases of the construction, and the dome was the main architectural element conserved. It was intriguing to observe the dome suspended by bars and elevated to 60 feet off the original ground level. I reflected on ancient dome structures, of how they were built, and the careful detail and function of support. While observing the building metamorphosis, I dedicated a series of paintings of the Old Emporium. Metamorphosis 2 is the second attempt in the working series. It shows a glorious structure under a nuclear emerald green sky. It is an uplifting moment for the dome as it seems to rise off the ground, similar to a spaceship. Various windows in color offer imaginary arrival into the infinite. In this drawing, titled Elevation, presents another interpretation of the Old Emporium dome during renovation. In these two paintings, titled Rising on the left and Towering Dome on the right, presents the Old Emporium Rotunda during the 2004 renovation prior to its new San Francisco Westfield Shopping Center. This dome may represent a water tower or could even look like a spaceship. Here we have another painting with similar imagery of the Old Emporium dome during renovation, titled Towering Dome, Phase 1. In this piece, I wanted to have a little fun with the text, and I titled it Floating Dome Araujo, which is my last name, and I pretty much stamped on the dome. Here we have two paintings, on the left titled The Old Emporium Dome at Dawn, and on the right, Old Emporium Rising. These were created in 2012, many years after the grand opening of Westfield San Francisco Shopping Center, and I had found some old photos I took during the renovation, and I wished to create some new paintings. These are a memory of when once upon a time the dome was seen at sunrise out in the open next to a crane awaiting for renovation. In this slide, I wish to present the paintings in progress for the Old Emporium Rising from left to right. And as you can see, I always begin my works as a sketch, a linear rendition of the building, and then I start playing with the colors on the sky and redefining its structure. During the month of September 2006, I had a solo show titled Reconstructing SoMa at DA Arts, which stood for the District Attorney's Office Gallery, and it was located on 6th Street at Minna. And I presented my paintings of San Francisco's Old Emporium Dome of the 2004 renovation. This was the first time I received a press and an article included on Beyond Cron about these paintings. Simultaneously, right before this show of Reconstructing SoMa at DA Arts, I met with Michael Morlan, the specialty leasing manager for Westfield San Francisco Shopping Center. Michael and his wonderful staff at Westfield made it possible for me to showcase my paintings of the Old Emporium during its grand opening, which was held on September 28, 2006. This show lasted a 2-year exhibition. I must share how incredible it was to manifest all of the excitement and efforts put into this construction. The month before the grand opening, hundreds of construction workers were gathered daily in and out of the building, accompanied by shipping trucks, also by the corporate and retail managers and new employees in training. It was quite a show, and most San Franciscans were excited to enter once opened. My paintings were on view at the top floor on level 4, which was below the original Old Emporium dome. The California Historical Society Museum also presented an exhibition next to mine, a display of archives and photos of the Old Emporium. A great opening unfolded and a new history for the Old Emporium, a time that I will never forget. From the Old Emporium, we're now entering another site, which is the Marriott Hotel, also called the Marriott Marquise, which is located at 55 4th Street at the corner of Mission Street. The Marriott Hotel, aka the Marriott Marquise, located at 4th and Mission Streets. An interesting story is that this building took 2 years to complete, and it opened and closed on the same day. Can you imagine that? On October 17th, 1989, the day of the Loma Prieta earthquake. Such a devastating moment to inaugurate and to be able to celebrate this building. There has been some content that I found from the general manager. His name was Alan Pialat, and he was the only hotel manager in history to open a brand new 1,500-room luxury hotel at 9 a.m. and close in 8 hours and 4 minutes later. This beautiful new building, sometimes reverently called the Wurlitzer Hotel, the Jukebox, and other less likable names, clad in mirror-like glass, had opened the very morning of the Loma Prieta earthquake. That night, all the guests were relocated from their rooms down to the massive ballroom where they were able to sleep on cots. Fortunately, there were very few injuries and none too serious. This hotel rises 39 stories high in the skyline. The building has different looks while viewing from afar. It may look like a jukebox, it may have a robotic influence, and can also be seen as an Egyptian sphinx. Another attribute to this wonderful building is going to the top floor, and while there at its restaurant, you can view the entire city. Here we have two paintings that are very similar. The first one on the left, titled Almighty Marriott, My Egypt, which was painted in 2012. Represents the Marriott Hotel in a modern look in bright tones. The title for this painting was inspired by the Precisionist painter Charles Demuth for his painting titled My Egypt. Later in 2018, I decided to paint the same piece for a solo show at the Tenderloin Museum, and I titled it Marriott Marquise. Behind the Marriott presents the backside of the Marriott Hotel on 4th and Mission Streets. And in front of the Marriott is another building in red concrete walls, dominating the composition in abstracted forms. Another favorite site is the clock building of 33 New Montgomery Street, positioned in between Mission and Market Streets and across from the infamous Palace Hotel. This building has a prominent feature of the large clock tower culminating in a spike at the top of the building. I've admired this clock for some time and have included it in several of my paintings. It is fun to notice this clock while walking from afar, such as from downtown area, and especially at night. For some years, whenever I'd walk in the neighborhood, I would look up at this clock and the time would read 9:05, a repetitive moment. I am constantly inspired when I see this building and look forward to reading the time. In this painting titled Second Street at Twilight, it presents the 33 New Montgomery clock in a more futuristic mood and could be reminiscent of a scene from Gotham City. And here we have a similar piece to Second Street at Twilight, which I titled Second Street. In this painting, I unite the buildings of San Francisco's SoMa and Mid-Market under a bright dark brown sky. The city is uplifted by the neon lights illuminated by a full moon. Several iconic structures are imagined, such as the Palace Hotel's marquee, along with the Golden Gate Theater and the Old Emporium's rotunda silhouettes. The original thermal plant from Fifth and Jessie Streets is placed in the middle, which continues to rise, along with two other figures rising at the sides. A construction stairway on the right, and on the left, a sharp pinnacle belonging to the clock tower of the 33 New Montgomery Street building, and situated across from the Palace Hotel. Incorporated at the bottom is an arcaded column, a continuous icon presented in my works, and admiration to classical architecture juxtaposed with the modern. The arcades present a range of luminous colors and opacity. SoMa Scene is my own vision for SoMa, the coming excitement at night, awake and silent. This is the second painting I did of the buildings united of SoMa and Mid-Market District, and I titled it SoMa Rising, which showcases several iconic buildings placed onto one street, as if they were all on the same street. The buildings include the Palace Hotel, the PG&E thermal plants of 6th and Jessie Streets, and the 33 New Montgomery clock. A building which exudes beauty and mystery due to its current status, since it has been closed for over a decade, and while offering over 100 years of architectural history, is San Francisco's Hibernia Bank. This building is located at Jones and Market Streets at the stretch of Market. This site was constructed in 1892 by the Beaux-Arts tradition by Albert Pieces, the same architect that also designed the Old Emporium. The Hibernia was considered the most beautiful building in San Francisco. Albert Pieces and William Moore both worked on the construction and design for the Hibernia Bank. In composition, it is a hybrid of a modified temple form and a variety of Baroque elements, notably the domed entrance corner and the fine entrance stairway. Its steel frame is clad in carved granite. Its interior is a richly detailed space dominated by a large stained glass dome. The crowned entrance dome provides a focal point, which is simultaneously the most massive part of the building, and a two-story open entranceway. To this day, I have not seen the interior in person. I hope one day. Even though the Hibernia Bank was constructed in 1892, the Hibernia was founded in 1859 by Richard Tobin. He was among the men who established the Hibernia Savings and Loan Society in that same year. He was elected the society's attorney for his firm, Tobin and Tobin, and served the organization for 130 years, as it became the Hibernia Bank and was eventually acquired by the most recent Bank of America since 1988. During all of those years, the Hibernia Bank remained the firm's principal client. An interesting fact, Dr. Tumblety, also known as Jack the Ripper, arrived in San Francisco in the early part of 1870 and took rooms at the Occidental Hotel. As quoted in the San Francisco Chronicle dated November 23, 1888, Dr. Tumblety opened an office at 20 Montgomery Street, but remained in the city only for a few months, leaving in September of the same year. While here, he opened an account with the Hibernia Bank and left a considerable amount to his credit in that institution when he went away. This account has never been closed, and the bank still has the money in its vaults. The Hibernia building was gutted in 1906 after the Great Earthquake and Fire, then rebuilt and became the headquarters of the police chief for a time. Several articles have been written over the years regarding the building's status, and as of very recent, there has been new ownership, as this building had been a deserted masterpiece, and new conservation can be noticed on its exterior. There's a sense of shelter and monumental elegance. In this piece, New Hibernia, I wish to present the Hibernia Bank as a contemporary classical architectural beauty in a frontal perspective and surrounded by an emerald green sky. The building contains its similar skeleton structure, accentuated by a bright palette in an awakened face, welcoming a new birth. While walking on Market Street towards downtown, and in between 6th and 7th Streets, is a magnificent building facade titled Furniture and Carpets. And if you're looking upwards, it is recognizable due to its large signage. The building is beautiful to look at. Furniture and Carpets presents a tall glass facade with its enormous Corinthian columns holding itself on its own. The original name of this entire building is an Eastern Outfitting Company, designed by the architect George Applegarth, and it was built sometime in 1906-1907. After the Eastern Outfitting Company went out of business, the upper levels have become sweatshops. I've been curious of the building's interior space since its exterior is so majestically designed. It must have some amazing skyline views. In the painting, The Palace and Carpets, an all-glass building is rising on the left. Meanwhile, a long diagonal building, the Palace Hotel, is presented in a modern style, grouping the pair with a facade of Furniture and Carpets, located on Market and 7th Streets. Both the Palace Hotel and Carpets are San Francisco's iconic landmarks, which were rebuilt after the 1906 earthquake. The invented all-glass building represents the new development for a futuristic city. The orange-red sky surrounds the setting, alive and on fire. San Francisco continues to rise. No matter how many fires and earthquakes burns and destroys, the city rebuilds. Some years after, I painted a replica derived from the diptych that we just looked at of the Palace and Carpets, and I titled this piece, The Palace and Carpets 2, which features the building's marquee for the Palace Hotel and Furniture and Carpets. I had forgot to mention a little bit about the Palace Hotel, which is a San Francisco city landmark located at 2 New Montgomery Street at the corner of Market. It was built in 1875 by the architect John P. Gaynor. The famous tenor, Enrico Caruso, was a guest at the hotel on April 18, 1906, the same day the Great Earthquake and Fire hit. This hotel survived the quake structurally, and it took 3 years to rebuild. Today, the Palace Hotel continues to glow, a sophisticated and marvelous hotel. In this piece, I am presenting the beginning stage for a painting that I titled Hibernia Meets Furniture and Carpets. This is the first stage of the painting, which just presents more of a linear drawing and starting to apply paint. It is showing the Hibernia Bank, the Furniture and Carpets building facade, and the 33 New Montgomery Clock building, which unites all three. In this painting, it presents the completion for Hibernia Meets Furniture and Carpets. I first painted this piece in 2008, and then in 2018, I decided to paint another replica so I could incorporate for an art exhibit. And it is shown in very bright tones, united by these three iconic buildings. I also wanted to share that the Furniture and Carpets facade has been restored and was acquired by Zendesk, I believe about 6 or 7 years ago. And they've done a terrific job with its look. It just looks absolutely beautiful. The lighting at night illuminates the entire street. In November of 2008, I had the great honor to collaborate with the artist Mark Ellinger for a two-person art exhibit titled Heart of the City, Paintings, Drawings, and Photography of San Francisco's Central City, the first inauguration of its venue at 134 Golden Gate, situated in the center of the historic Tenderloin neighborhood. This exhibition was held at the Norfolk Market Tenderloin Community Benefit District Gallery, which hosted its first art exhibit in 2008, which also celebrated my book release, SoMa Scene, which showcased paintings and drawings, all from the South of Market and Mid-Market districts. This exhibition of Heart of the City also celebrated Mark Ellinger's first book publication, titled Up from the Deep, The Hotel Project, Part 2, Mid-Market Street. And these are some fantastic photography that he displayed for his book and for this exhibit. Mark Ellinger was a remarkable photographer who lived in the heart of the South of Market and Tenderloin districts for over 2 decades and has been documenting the surrounding architecture. Mark and I shared the same interests in conserving the decayed beauty seen in its central city. Presented are references to publications that were featured about our exhibit, Heart of the City, on the San Francisco Chronicle. Both Mark Ellinger and I were interviewed, as well as Elaine Zamora, who was the director of the Norfolk Market Tenderloin Benefit District's office. And this was all in celebration of its inauguration and exhibition. As you can see, featured on the right is my painting of SoMa Rising. I could not believe that this painting and our exhibit was featured on the front page of the Chronicle on December 24th, 2008. The San Francisco Chronicle featured a lovely photo of the artist, Mark Ellinger, and myself, and accompanied with Elaine Zamora, the director of the Norfolk Market Tenderloin District offices. And this was featured for the inauguration of our exhibit, which was extended for 6 months duration. It was a lovely memory. And then the photo on the right is featuring myself with Mark Ellinger. And this was taken by a mutual friend and photographer, Mike Humbert. We were so grateful that he was here at the opening. We both got to sign our books. We met wonderful people. And I'm sad to share that Mark Ellinger passed away. It will be a year this October. And it has been such an emptiness for San Francisco. But he is forever immortalized with his beautiful photography. And I'm just so honored to have met him and to have been able to collaborate in this fantastic exhibit. I would like to take a moment also to share with you something that was quite surprising and that both Mark Ellinger and I were so thrilled about. In 2013, we had attended the Noir City Film Festival, which is taking place at the Castro Theater, and it is held at the end of January every year. And he and I had gone together with her friend Mike Humbert, and we went to see a film titled The Sniper from 1952. Little did we know that one of the thermal plants of 6th and Jessie Streets is featured in this movie. The protagonist is standing on the rooftop of 14 Mint Street, targeting to shoot a woman on Stevenson Alley. During the scene, the shooter is distracted from behind by a painter climbing the PG&E plant and becomes his next target, which is his 5th victim. The PG&E Tower is captivating to watch close up and from afar. Here are some photos taken from the realsf.com. In this segment, I will be featuring some other imagery of other buildings from the surrounding area of Mid-Market. This painting presents the Hilton Hotel, located on O'Farrell Street and in between Union Square and the Tenderloin District. It is painted in monochromatic bright tones, and it also carries a futuristic quality of how the building is set and the focal point with its glass dome, which I especially love seeing at night. Dreaming of 255 presents the building facade located at 255 Golden Gate Avenue in San Francisco, a place I'm confronted by and admire every day en route to the city. It has a clean front in white and at the entrance accompanied by Corinthian columns. It's a personal sight I enjoy seeing and wish to recapture painted on canvas. In 2012, I was invited to exhibit new paintings at a gallery and furniture design showroom titled Artitude, which was located in the heart of SoMa and continues to be there. Tatiana Takaeva, the director, gave me the idea to create new works from the rooftop view from her 12th floor apartment at SoMa Grand, a building located on Mission Street at 7th and overlooks the whole city, and hence these quartet paintings were created. For some years, I had been intrigued by the construction process of the new federal building at the corner of 7th and Mission Streets, an 18-story high skyscraper next door to SoMa Grand. The building was designed by Tom Main of Morphosis. It was completed in 2007. This building received criticism of the design's non-functional use of extended folded metal sun shading at ground level, which in the opinion of some are purely for aesthetic effect. Personally, I think it is a very unique and tasteful building and have grown to appreciate, and so glad I finally painted. In Rooftop View from SoMa Grand 2, this is a second painting derived from the 12th floor of SoMa Grand. And while looking at the city, it looked so romantic to me, especially by featuring the Transamerica Pyramid, which is seen at the top right in a triangular form. At that time, in 2012, the Transamerica Pyramid was considered the tallest skyscraper and the most iconic in San Francisco, 850 feet tall. Rooftop View from SoMa Grand 3 is critical in that it bridges the gap between the pure geometries of the first painting I did from SoMa Grand, which features the Federal Building, and the second painting, which features the Transamerica Pyramid, making the unexpected transition to the English Romantic movement sky that dominates in the following painting that you will see shortly. A direct progression from the strictly opaque geometries of the Federal Building. Also to be seen here are the PG&E Egyptian-style 1920s thermal plants. The jukebox of the Marriott peeks into view behind the neoclassical original Federal Building. All the buildings depicted are tightly woven into a fabric of their own. The sky dominating on its own as a bow to realism. This final painting was completed 6 days before Superstorm Sandy hit and may hold the key to the sudden sky. A storm is brewing. Seen on the far right is One Rincon Hill, which telegraphs its foggy isolation from the freeway across to the Intercontinental Hotel seen in the center. The tenuousness of both challenged and held up by that most unexpected and unexpectedly powerful force, the colorful house of card of the old, low-slung and disappearing paper-thin warehouses, helter-skelter, but now tightly arranged on a geometric axis of the old South of Market. The quartet paintings that I created derived from the 12th floor of SoMa Grand. These were in part for a solo show that was organized by Artitude and to be placed at the front lobby of SoMa Grand building located on Mission and 7th Streets. This was done in October 2012, and this is the invitation card, which features a self-portrait that I photographed with a very simple camera. I was photographing from the window all of the pictures of the city that I created for these paintings. In celebration of this exhibition, The City from SoMa Grand, I also self-published my second book entitled SoMa Rising, featuring new works up to that date of Mid-Market and South of Market districts. It was truly wonderful to have received some publicity for this exhibit of the city from SoMa Grand. I was featured on Artslant, written by Wilma Parker. She wrote a beautiful piece with full description about my paintings. And separately, too, urban critic John King from the San Francisco Chronicle had telephoned and interviewed me, so he hence published an article on the datebook page for the Chronicle. I was so delighted to see the paintings on view. The City from SoMa Grand and my book release for SoMa Rising were also featured in a couple of other publications, which included the San Francisco Examiner and with the Huffington Post on the real estate page. It was so thrilling to see these on view during this exhibition. San Francisco's landscape is rapidly changing and continues to build new high-rises. For many years, the Transamerica Pyramid was considered the tallest building of San Francisco, followed by One Rincon Hill in the South of Market. By the middle of the 2000s, the Transbay Terminal was being developed, and by 2017, Salesforce was rising up, considered now the tallest building of all San Francisco Bay. It is 1,070 feet high. It is located at 415 Mission Street in between First and Fremont Streets. It's a great building to look at when you're really close up and you're looking up. It is so overwhelming. And then also when you're crossing from the Golden Gate Bridge or the Bay Bridge, it's a building that you really see fully 360 degrees. It is magnificent to watch in the daytime and at night with the fog or in a bright twilight and with the wonderful light show. In this painting, it is shown the beginning construction phase, and it is painted in pastel tones with a bit of fog, and it kind of reminds me of a 1950s approach with a painting. I have many fond memories of exhibiting my paintings at diverse venues and art galleries in San Francisco, and I wish that I could share all of those highlights in this slideshow, but it would just never end. And so I take this moment to say thank you to all of those venues and gallery directors and friends and all art lovers alike for being there and supporting my work. And I'd also like to mention that San Francisco History Days at the Old Mint has been one of my favorite places to display my works. It is always an exciting and new experience throughout the years. I've loved meeting new friends and old and familiar faces, as well as engaging with my neighboring vendors that are there to share about the history of San Francisco for their mini museums. My first time exhibiting with San Francisco History Days took place in 2014, and in collaboration with the Treasure Island Museum, I had been invited to show some of my paintings that were inspired by the Golden Gate International Exposition of 1939 that took place at Treasure Island. This is a different series of paintings, primarily inspired by the forgotten treasures of this fair, and in particular of the statue of Pacifica that was created by Ralph Stackpole, a prominent artist from the 1930s. The photos displayed here present a painting of Pacifica that converted into a poster that we were offering with the Treasure Island Museum. And it was so much fun to sign these posters and souvenirs and engage with all the visitors. I've had the pleasure to exhibit my paintings on both floors of the Old Mint at the main lobby, which occurred for my first exhibit, Mid-Market Landmarks, in 2015, and followed for the following years. I was exhibiting at the vault at the downstairs level, which is also a fascinating place with rich history in all of its rooms. A big thank you for joining me today on the special programming for San Francisco History Day's 10th year anniversary. To learn more about me, my works, and my books, or if you wish to share any comments or if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and you can visit me at abstractmetropolis.com. Cheers!